Our third speaker tonight will be Sharon O'Connor. So resilience is the ability to withstand and recover from a difficult circumstance. It's a quality all humans have to one extent or another. We are all here at Toastmasters because we're resilient and have found a way to help ourselves and one another. Tonight, Sharon O'Connor will tell us a story of a young woman's history of resilience and how she and her husband made their wedding day a special day for everyone present. So tonight, Sharon O'Connor is her title of her speech is Resilience, one woman's example of a quality we all have. Ladies and gentlemen, Toastmasters, Sharon O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and visitors. I heard two people talking on the radio about the resilience of children, and I started thinking about us because they were describing how when something bad happens, you get up, you kind of brush yourself off, and you go forward. But I was then also reminded of an event that I witnessed. I was only a very small part of it, but I was really happy to have witnessed it, and this is it. My sister lives in a place called St. Simon's Island, and it's off the coast of Georgia, about an hour south of Savannah. And she has a very nice circle of friends. And one of them is named Pat. And Pat's husband became very sick, very quick, and it became very expensive because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And they went to the Mayo Clinic, they went someplace in Boston. And because the reason it was so expensive is that their insurance didn't cover a lot of these things, and they certainly didn't cover any of the transportation. So by the time this poor soul died, less than a year than when he became ill, all their savings were gone, totally gone. And their daughter, their only child, her whole college fund gone. And she was a junior, going to be a junior in college at the time. So Pat decided that she needed to sell the house, and she got a much smaller one, much further inland. And it was a two-bedroom house, and Nora couldn't stay at school anymore, so she got a full-time job, working as a security guard for a very exclusive neighborhood down there. And she got the graveyard shift, and she wanted it, because then she could study. So she started commuting to Savannah, where she was going to school. And it took her a bit longer, but she finished. And then, as they had been living in the smaller house for a couple of years, they began to notice things weren't going, things that needed to be done. So she kept the job at the as the security guard, and she replaced the washer and the dryer, the furnace and the AC. The AC, they need much more down there. They remodeled the bathroom and the kitchen, and they put a new roof on the house and the garage and laid a new driveway, all in preparation of Pat living there by herself, because Nora knew she was going to be leaving at some point or other. So after this happened, Nora met a very nice man, and they became engaged. And so she said, well, this is great. I'll keep the job, and I will just start now my wedding bank account. So as it turns out, her fiancé works for the federal government, and he was offered a 2-year position in Europe, but he had to be ready to roll in 14 weeks. And he wanted Nora to go with him, and Nora wanted to go. And so Pat was telling this to these women at lunch one day, and she said, well, we're just going to go down to the courthouse, and then we'll have a little dinner afterwards, and, that'll be that. And my sister, who is in one of her former lives an events coordinator, said, what? We've got 8 to 10 weeks to set up a reception. This will be no problem. So they organized a meeting and invited Nora to come. And as it turns out, they really were able to do it. One woman belonged to the St. Simon's Historical Society, and they have this big, beautiful southern mansion that they rent out to members at a reduced price. She grabbed that. Two of the women are always vying for the best garden on the island, and they agreed to donate all the flowers. One of the women was a retired chef, and she said, for 50 guests, I can do a one-course meal. And she did it. The groom bought the liquor. My sister took Nora around reselling, and they found a beautiful dress that Nora absolutely loved for under $50. My sister called me and invited me to be the bartender, and I was ecstatic because I know these people from going down there. And so I said, I'm coming, I want to be there, but send me a picture of Nora's dress and I'll make her veil. So that all happened. So the one thing that Nora was very adamant about was her wedding cake. Now this woman is the farthest thing from a bridezilla that you will ever hope to meet. And she was so grateful for everything that everyone gave her and thought everything was absolutely wonderful. But in those hours after she had gotten her degree and she was spending time in this guardhouse, she designed her wedding cake. Long before she ever thought about getting married, she was designing this cake. And the reason that she did that was when she was still in school in Savannah, in a curio shop, she found a cake topper. And it wasn't the old-fashioned kind, it was a very modern, very pretty topper. And so she designed her wedding cake sort of with this topper in mind. So sure enough, she found a baker who did it exactly the way she wanted it. And so we're at the venue, and the cocktail hour ends, and they open up these gorgeous pocket oak doors. And you walked into the dining room, and it was gorgeous. Every table had a different flower arrangement on it. And this begins to sound like a Hallmark movie plot, but the husband had a friend who was in a a string quartet. And they agreed to do the music for the dinner, and one of them agreed to play the piano for the cocktail hour. So it was just gorgeous. You couldn't have hoped for anything better. And the cake was right as you walk in. It was almost like part of the decorations. So everyone was walking in, and the very last people to walk through the door into the dining room was the groom's Uncle Bob and his wife. And they're walking to their table, and they walk over to look at the cake because it's so beautiful. And he loses his footing and begins to fall into the cake. Now, another quick-witted guest sees this, and she reaches over and she's able to stop the cake from falling off the table, but now there's this huge handprint in part of her arm print and part of the cake. And during this, the topper falls off, and when it hit the floor, the bride and the groom were decapitated. So everything stopped. It was like quiet as a tomb in the room. The musicians stopped playing, the guests stopped talking, and as though it was choreographed, Nora and her husband, it makes me want to cry, Nora and her husband ran over to Uncle Bob, and when they figured out that he was okay, he didn't have a heart attack or anything, he had just fallen into the cake. Nora looked at everything and started laughing. She started laughing. And her husband started laughing, and the music started up again, and the guests all started talking. And the very first picture that was taken of them at their reception was Nora and her husband standing with Uncle Bob and his wife with the cake all over the front of the suit. And they looked so happy. And that is Nora's favorite wedding picture, and she has it framed in her house right today. So, you know what? If that isn't resilience, I don't know what is. And I think they're going to make it.